I want to take you back to January 6th and the police officer that was brutally beaten. In fact, here are a couple of interviews with him right after January 6th.
I got hurt. I would do it again if I have to. It's my job. It was very scary because I thought I was going to lose my life. When I came in, she wanted to hug me, and I told her no. Because I was covered. I was covered in pepper spray. My hands were bleeding still. And I couldn't even sleep because I took a shower, and instead of helping, that re-inflamed the chemicals.
It had soaked through your clothes?
Yes. Took a bath with milk. That ain't help.
Wow. Here's another cut.
I, too, was being crushed by the rioters. I could feel myself losing oxygen and recall thinking to myself, this is how I'm going to die, defending this entrance.
Stop. That is pretty hard to hear. Now, Julie Kelly is a journalist, and she's been given analysis and commentary related to the weaponization of the U.S. Department of Justice. She writes on the Substack, Declassified, with Julie Kelly. She also is giving us some really unique looks at January 6th and the pending criminal indictments of Donald Trump. And Julie has just tweeted out earlier this week that story doesn't seem to fit. Do I have that right, Julie?
You do have that right, Glenn, and thank you so much for having me on and sharing my work.
Sure.
So Officer Aquilino Gonell, who you heard there, his sob story, has been one of what I call January 6th celebrity cops. So he was one of 4 police officers, security guards, who testified during the very first January 6th Select Committee televised hearing. The idea of that hearing was to make it sound like Trump supporters tried to kill police officers that day. And Gonell has been now for 2.5 years telling his sob story, his near-death experience, that he almost died, injuries to his head, his hands, his shoulder, that his foot was crushed. Well, footage that was obtained by Joe Hanneman at Epoch Times, I have to credit him. When I was looking at his coverage of what happened to Roseanne Boyland, the first person who popped up, in my view, was Officer Gonell. And so I zoomed in. It's like, well, I can't believe this is him. And there he is for 7 minutes, as I should have in my piece and on Twitter, walking around, no indication of any injury, no sign of pain. He's actually kicking things aside with his feet. His hands are visible. There's no bleeding. There's no abrasions on his hands. His shoulders, both shoulders are mobile. He's taking off gear. He's bending up and down. He's moving things around. He's putting on his a surgical face mask. No apparent signs of pain or injury for 7 minutes. But yet here he has been a key figure in promoting the idea that police were almost killed on January 6th and that he was so grievously injured, Glenn, that he had to take medical leave for at least a year, and then only went back to partial duty due to his injuries and surgeries he claimed that he had because of those injuries.
What else do you know about him, Julie?
I don't know much. I know he is a veteran. I know he's an immigrant, I believe, from maybe the Dominican Republic. That's really all that I know. But Glenn, I also want to underscore his words and his claims are not without consequence. He has been a government witness in trials of January 6th defendants where he has taken the stand under oath and talked about his injuries that he suffered. He has filed victim impact statements and sentencing hearings for January 6th defendants, talking about these serious injuries that were inflicted by Trump supporters. And he specifically says Trump supporters. He does not say protesters, rioters, Trump supporters. This has helped judges impose very long, harsh sentences against January 6th defendants. And in fact, Glenn, one federal judge, Trevor McFadden, specifically called out Officer Gonell in his testimony in one trial and said that his testimony about his injuries were not credible and that he did not believe when Officer Gonell said he had been beaten with a stolen baton. So it's not just that he's talking on, CNN, Jake Tapper, or he's posting this garbage on Twitter. He has said these things under oath, as I said, with dire consequences for defendants.
Do you know, because I know you've been following all of the cases, and I would assume you know some of the attorneys just by following it. Are they looking into retrying their cases? I mean, this is information that the government had and didn't release. That seems like a miscarriage of justice.
So well said, Glenn. And this has been a criticism of defendants now for more than 2 years, that this Department of Justice and Capitol Police, by the way, have designated all of this footage as highly sensitive government material. All of it has been under strict protective orders in court. And the government is really only turning over footage to defendants that is case specific. So say in the case
Correct.
of Pat McCoy, where Gonell testified, they only saw footage of the defendant, the security video of that particular defendant. They didn't turn over or produce the video of Officer Gonell. And this is only one clip that we've seen. I'm sure there's other footage of him walking through the Capitol. And keep in mind, this is around 5 o'clock that day. This isn't before the violence between protesters and police began. This is after it ended. So it's not like he went back to another area of the Capitol and got beaten up by protesters. The building had been evacuated. The grounds were being evacuated. So yes, I believe that the two defendants where Officer Gonell testified and filed victim impact statements, they are on appeal. So I'm sure that this footage will be part of their appeal as to what the government was hiding, not just from the public, but from defendants and their attorneys.
Right. So you're following greatly the weaponization of the government hearings that are going on. Do you believe that those move forward into anything of significance? I'm
not sure, Glenn. I was really hoping that there would be a separate January 6th committee. And we really need one for two reasons: to expose all of the lies and falsehoods that were promoted by the first select committee, and also to tell the American people the truth, to show them this video. I mean, I post this on Twitter and Truth Social, and I post it obviously in my work, and thanks to interviews like this, it's reaching a broader audience. But they need televised hearings. They need to fight back with what the January 6th Select Committee, because this is the crux of the weaponization of the Department of Justice and this administration. This January 6th is ground zero for turning the war on terror that once was against ISIS and Al-Qaeda against conservatives, Republicans, Trump supporters. So you can't talk about weaponizing government without fully exposing the truth about January 6th. What the Department of Justice is doing, concealing evidence, the lies that the Congress has told to the American people, and how the FBI is using its counterterrorism unit to continue, even this week, Glenn, 2.5 years later, arrest people related to even minimal participation in the events of January 6th.
Unbelievable. So, Julie, I think you could make a case that this is even more important than the Hunter and Joe Biden selling their country out for, well, their fellow countrymen. I think they got 30 cents a head for us. Can you compare the two?
I guess, but I would argue that this is more important because everyone sort of knows nothing is really going to happen to Hunter Biden. I think it's extremely useful what James Comer and the Oversight Committee and, of course, the Ways and Means Committee and these courageous whistleblowers from the IRS and FBI are talking about with these investigations. But January 6th it's going to be a key issue in the 2024 presidential race, but this Department of Justice is still collecting victims. They're still collecting scalps. Yeah. And so there's it is far, in my view, of course, far more important. The American people need to know what is happening, not just Department of Justice, but in this courthouse, which is where Donald Trump's lawyers are today, as Jack Smith is now preparing a multi-count felony criminal indictment against Donald Trump for January 6th and could rope in attorneys, White House officials, and maybe even a few Republican members of the House.
This is crazy. Thank you so much for everything that you do. I appreciate that you have just zeroed in on this and not let it go, Julie. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on, Glenn.
Substack Declassified with Julie Kelly. Check it out. Substack Declassified with Julie Kelly.